Hello, everyone. This is Matt Pilisher, Logistics Coordinator for Poor People's Army. Thank you for joining us for the press conference today. Thinking Beyond Ukraine, Their War is Not Our War. We'll be getting started in a few minutes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Let me make sure. Yes. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the press conference, Thinking Beyond Ukraine, Their War is Not Our War. My name is Netfa Freeman. I'm an organizer in the organization Pan-African Community Action, PACA, and also on the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. We want to thank you for attending this joint gathering of two leading human rights organizations dedicated to advancing people-centered human rights through agency of the people. It's important, especially in the upcoming march on Washington this weekend. It's important that everyone is reminded of the historic task we face in this country, being at the center of empire and being members of and organizing with groups and people suffering from structural violence of capitalism and colonialism. This press conference is being held by the Poor People's Army and the Black Alliance for Peace to lay out some important crossovers between anti-poverty work and anti-war work. And we'll have three speakers for about 5 minutes each. Then questions from the press and audience, prioritizing the press. And we ask that everyone keep their questions to 30 seconds. And then and that's pretty much, that's how we're going to do it. Let me say some about the speakers that we have who will be addressing us today. We have three important people who are going to be addressing us today. First, we will hear from Pastor Keith Collins, a graduate of Geneva College and also holds an MS&D MS and Doctorate of Ministries degrees from Friends International Christian University. Pastor Keith is an ordained minister with the Inner City Faith Congress and the Lancaster Mennonite Conference. Pastor Keith is a marathon runner and cyclist, and also served as an officer in the U.S. Army. He's an organizer in the Poor People's Army and has done extensive organizing with Delco Coalition to abolish death by incarceration, move members and others against the criminal injustice system. We also will hear from Ajamu Baraka, the national organizer of the Black Alliance for Peace, and also the 2016 candidate for Vice President of the United States on the Green Party ticket. Baraka serves on the executive committee of the U.S. Peace Council and leadership body of the United National Anti-War Coalition, also known as UNAC, and the steering committee of the Black is Back Coalition. And last but not least, we will hear from Cheri Honkala, a formerly homeless mother and founder of the leader of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and before that, Kensington Welfare Rights Union. Cheri gained fame when she was a homeless mother breaking into abandoned government-owned houses and occupying them in order to survive. Cheri has traveled internationally to meet with peasant movements and revolutionary leaders. She ran for vice president of the U.S. With Jill Stein for the Green Party in 2012, and she also ran for sheriff of Philadelphia in 2011 and Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2017, both on the Green Party ticket. Cheri is a founding general in the Poor People's Army and an elder advisor in the Second Rainbow Coalition, of which Poor People's Army is a part. So we're going to go to our first speaker, Pastor Keith, and then everyone's going to have 5 minutes. I'm going to be timing it, and everyone will be timed, and then we're going to open up for a question and answer. So, Pastor Keith, thank you. You know, you have to unmute. You're still muted. Can you unmute yourself, Pastor Keith?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm awesomely excited to be here with these two wonderful, marvelous organizations. And we're here to talk about what is most important to us, which is liberty and liberation and freedom. So I'm here to say something for a few moments from a faith-based perspective. Being a pastor and minister for over 40 years, being a part of Empire and then being against Empire, as was stated, I've served in the United States Army as a paratrooper. I've served as a law enforcement officer. I've done a lot of things to support the Empire, but I've had a catharsis. I've had an epiphany, and I realized that the words of Christ really, really were about creating a manifesto. When he said in Luke 4:18, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because He has anointed me to heal that which was broken. He's anointed me to give liberty to those that are bound." So this gospel message, particularly from those of us that are faith practitioners, must be a gospel of liberation. And someone once said, why is it that we reject the charity model? Shouldn't the church support charity? Well, the reason we reject the charity model is very simple. Charity is vertical. Charity is from the top down. And in charity, the people that are on the top remain on the top, and the people that are on the bottom usually remain on the bottom or very close to the bottom. We believe in a faith-based model that celebrates solidarity. Solidarity is always horizontal. It respects all those around you, and it respects each other, each person as our equal. And it is not a condescending agenda, but it's an agenda that empowers everyone. And this is why, from a faith-based perspective, we really need to have an agenda that understands that we cannot create this revolution that we're talking about, that Dr. King was assassinated for in 1968. When he talked about reparations, when he talked about wealth redistribution, that's when he was assassinated. We need to take upon ourselves that mantle and become the faith leaders that are not in love with notoriety and power, but that are in love with justice and truth and the empowerment of those that are the least and the last and the lost. So it's in that spirit that we stand in solidarity with the PPEHRCorg and with the Black Alliance for Peace, because we fully understand that this movement will not be funded by foundations. It will not be funded by multinational corporations. It will not be funded by philanthropic people. It must be a people-led, people-driven revolution, and we must have faith leaders that are in complete alignment with that agenda. So it's in that spirit that we're proud to stand here today in this conference, and we do celebrate the work that's being done by Black Alliance for Peace and PPEHRCorg, of which I have been a very proud member for several years and continue to serve in whatever capacity they would have us to serve.
Thank you, Pastor Keith. That was, you still had some time to go, but that's all right. We can flush it out in the question and answer. Next, Brother Ajamu Baraka.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Netfa, for stepping forward to moderate this very important gathering, very important press conference a few days before this gathering of organizations in the capital of the United States of America. And that's why we're here this morning. So thank you, and in particular, thank you, the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign that has been at the forefront of the domestic struggle for human rights in this country. And especially want to acknowledge the visionary leadership of our dear sister and comrade, Cheri Honkala. It is indeed an honor for BAP to be a part of this gathering, to lend our voice to call for a shift in priorities away from the cult of death and oppression represented by the policies of this administration, from the streets of Philly to the completely avoided, and we say in BAP, the manufactured war in Ukraine. We say this morning as groups are gathering this weekend to supposedly challenge the state's continued avoidance of the issues of poverty, that poverty and its eradication cannot occur without the acknowledgement that it will take fundamental structural change by popular forces that are independently organized and prepared to challenge the entrenched power of capital operating through the duopoly and currently through the neoliberal Biden administration. Dr. King reminded us of the connection between racism, materialism, meaning capitalism, and militarism. He referred to these as the giant triplets. He reminded the movement of these fundamental relationships and declared his opposition to the war in Vietnam. That declaration earned him the wrath of the entire liberal establishment and had his life taken from him 1 year to the date of his declaration to break with the silence on Vietnam. This ultimate sacrifice is a model that must be assumed if one is serious about human rights. One cannot have one foot in the establishment, echoing its most backward positions on issues like the war in Ukraine, and the other foot with the people, declaring solidarity with the people suffering from the rapacious greed and violence of a ruling class operating through the two capitalist parties. One has to make a choice. You are either with the people all the way or with the enemies of human rights, democracy, and global social justice. Today, PPEHRCorg and BAP declare our firm commitment to the life-affirming values of equality, social justice, cooperation, participatory democracy, self-determination, and non-oppression, represented by the people-centered human rights framework. However, we recognize that we are not going to realize people-centered human rights by just criticizing the rulers or begging for them to recognize human rights. We understand that the realization of human rights must come about as a result of struggle. That's why BAP is joining hands with PPEHRCorg in their efforts to build a poor people's army, a non-violent army dedicated to grounding the working class and poor people in the people-centered human rights framework, and collectively, through our own agency, creating the conditions where we can experience the full range of human rights. People-centered human rights are those non-oppressive rights that reflect the highest commitment to universal human dignity and social justice that individuals and collectives define and secure for themselves through social struggle. The people-centered framework proceeds from the assumption that the genesis of the assaults on human dignity that are at the core of human rights violations is located in the relationships of power, the relationships of oppression. The people-centered human rights framework does not pretend to be non-political. It is a political project in the service of the oppressed. It names enemies of freedom, the Western white supremacist colonial capitalist patriarchy, the demands for clean waters, a safe and accessible food, free quality education, healthcare, healthiness for all, housing, public transportation, wages, and a socially productive job that allow for a dignified life, the ending of mass incarceration, universal free childcare, opposition to war, and the control and eventual elimination of the police, self-determination and respect for democracy. All of these aspects are some of the people-centered human rights that can only be realized through a bottom-up mass movement for power, building power from the bottom up. That is the historical task that we face and the historic responsibility that we must assume for ourselves and call on everyone to recognize this task and come off the fence.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brother Ajamu Baraka. And now, please, if we can hear from Cheri Honkala of the Poor People's Campaign for Economic and Human Rights.
Good morning. Today is our day in the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and as poor people across this country, to come together to make a bold statement to announce the breaking of our silence, regardless of the fear or consequences that will result. We are honored to take this step along with the Black Alliance for Peace and our dear pastor, Pastor Collins from Church of the Overcomer. We have no choice to be here today, not because we want to be here, but because we have to be here. We are here because we have a responsibility to our ancestors, our brothers and our sisters struggling for survival at home and abroad. We come here on the days before the weekend where many children, like my son, will grieve their fathers on Father's Day because this system and this reform path that people have decided to take never gave them a chance at having a life. The drug war has taken more people's lives than during the Vietnam War. My son doesn't weep alone this Father's Day. He weeps with children in Palestine, in Yemen, in Africa, in Venezuela, all over the world, because we continue as a country to kill the dreams of children all over the world and here in Kensington. From the poor in Kensington to the poor suffering all over the world, we stand with our brothers and sisters. We see you. We hear you. These wars of sanctions and allocating billions for war while you go to bed tonight hungry and homeless. We must come together to say no, to put an end to all war, to put an end to all sanctions. How dare we stand by as billions are spent on war when our children and their children continue to suffer. We are tired of our children going without water, going without health care, going without food, being shot down in record numbers in the streets, and having no place to lay their heads. Today, we are committed to reconfirm our commitment to building a poor people's army. A poor people's army to put an end to poverty, hunger, and homelessness once and for all, because it is entirely possible in our country. Our country has plenty, not just for those of us living in this country, but in other parts of the world. And we ask for your support in building this poor people's army. We will hold a boot camp in Philadelphia in August. At that time, we will map out our plans for taking back land, for taking back housing, for taking back food, for taking back all the basic necessities of life. Incrementalism and reform have been killing our families, have been killing our dreams, our futures for our children and children around the world. And today that process stops. We will no longer agree to be the poor people that fill the buses, that go to Washington, D.C., that sit down and beg our
1 minute.
oppressors to change what's happening in this country. We will get organized from the bottom, put boots on the ground, and we will take back our basic human rights. We will educate people about a people's centered human rights approach. And we will ensure that no longer that we will cooperate with our death, our incarceration, and the killing of our dreams and the killing of this planet. New billionaires are minted every 26 hours as inequality contributes to the death of one person every 4 seconds. While every 11 minutes, a child between the ages of 11 and 16, someplace in this world takes their life. We will no longer sit down with our oppressors. We will liberate ourselves and live up to our historical duty of doing our part for our ancestors and our children.
Thank you, Cheri. Okay, we will move to the question. We're going to open it up to question and answers. Remember, we want to prioritize those of the press. This is a press conference, but we're not closing it off to other people. If you can you'll see we put in the chat a couple of times. If you can put in the chat that you have a question, or I have the host will help me with you raising your hand. Maybe suggestion would be raise a hand if you are a member of the press, and then we can call on you. If you have you can use the fist thing if you want to do that, and then that'll tell us that you have a question, but that you're not pressed, and you'll allow us to keep it. Or you can just put in that you have a question and put your affiliation in the chat. That would be quite helpful. The first question I saw was, let me make sure I'm not, is from Jeremy Witt. I think that's the first one. Jeremy Witt is direct asked, and Jeremy Witt is with the Green Party. I can't make out everything, but I have to go to, so it says, is the direct action like what is scheduled to be done this weekend the only way to make gains in the struggle for human rights and peace? Or are there any tactics related to the ballot and electoral process that you endorse or recommend? It's not directed at anyone, so go ahead, Cheri.
Well, I just want to clarify, the people that are gathering in Washington, D.C. to participate in, some of them are participating in nonviolent civil disobedience. That is in no way, shape, and form us. I believe what we're talking about is not negotiating with our oppressors, but getting organized to take back the basic necessities of life. On the bottom, coming together as homeless people, reclaiming our own housing, reclaiming land, feeding each other, using a people-centered human rights approach. We're not talking about pretending like this is still a different time in history, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, or whatever. Robotics and technology are permanently replacing workers in this country. There's a section of the permanently unemployed that's being created. Our planet is in jeopardy, and the White House has never done anything for anybody, and we don't expect them to do it anytime soon.
Sorry. Thank you, Cheri. Did Pastor Keith or Ajamu, did you want to also add anything to that question?
No, I think Cheri covered most of it for me.
Okay. Okay, so the next one that we have is this is Sandy, the Green Party New York Executive Committee member at large. Is there a Buffalo, New York chapter of the People's Army or Black Lives for Peace? So that's both for Cheri and Ajamu. Who wants to go first, Cheri? The question is there a Buffalo, New York chapter of the poor people?
I don't think we have a Buffalo chapter right now, but we'd be more than happy to have whoever asked that question to step forward, and we'll talk to you about how to set up one. But we're setting up chapters all over the entire country. We take inspiration from a group of peasants that came together in Chiapas and said, what are we gonna do? And they built you know, a poor people's peasant army in Chiapas. And we live here in the belly of the beast, and we intend to do the same.
Mhm.
Yes, I will echo that we are, in terms of the Black Alliance of Peace, we do have a couple of members in Buffalo, but we don't have a citywide alliance at this point. But again, our efforts here this morning is to support the expansion of the Poor People's Army, and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign is an affiliate of the Black Alliance of Peace also. So we have a relationship, or we're developing this more deeply. So it's about building an organization. So that's the approach we are taking. And thank you so much for the questions, folks. And please remember to direct your questions to a specific person. And again, we want to prioritize the press before we get to some of the very important questions coming from the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajamu. The next question, because the rest is from Julie Verghese, editor of Toward Freedom. Will you provide us with the written statements of the speakers? Well, I guess I didn't need to read that out loud. We can't, but what I don't know, yeah, because Pastor Keith, you seem, I don't know if you have written statement comments, but we could do that. I don't want to step, Cheri, you want to answer that? Because I don't want to, as the moderator. Yes, okay, we'll do it. Okay, so and then that's an easy one. And then I'm going down because people put the questions in the chat. So there is, will the video be provided in the written statements that we already asked that? We can make the video provided as well. Erica from Hoodcom, are there statements? Everyone's saying the same thing. Can we provide written statements? All the questions are about that. So somebody, Lisa Savage, a Green blogger in the Green Party in Maine, would you like to come off mute? And you have a question, I think that's.
Thank you, Netfa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you to everyone who organized this press conference, and also thank you for saying how we could get written statements. I was typing as fast as I could, but I want to make a blog post, and I don't want to misquote people. This is such an important issue, and I thank you for your leadership. I'm aware of the work of both organizations that are sponsoring, and it's been good work for many years. My question is, I guess for Cheri, but it could be for any of the three, and that is that I have witnessed the incredible pull and allure of these Democratic Party front groups like the Poor People's Campaign in pulling in young activists who are sincerely from marginalized groups. They are working class or experiencing homelessness. They are organizing around other different types of issues such as reproductive justice, or such as meeting the needs of the unhoused community. And I see them, young people in particular. I mean, I'm pretty old, so by young I'm meaning like under 30 or maybe in their 30s.
You need to, okay, can you sum up the question?
Being brought into these very well-funded, huge PR campaign. And I try through relationships with these people to tactfully and kindly point out to them where this is coming from. They should look a little deeper into the organizations. Anybody have any suggestions for being more effective at that kind of work? Thank you.
I think it begins today. For us, we really had to break our silence. When you begin to see people that talk about being anti-war, you know, sitting at the table with both of the parties that are responsible for the conditions that are happening here in this country and around the world, then we have to step forward and we have to call it out. We have to say something out loud. And I think that we're trying desperately to, you know, take the curtain and pull it back. And we need to create pie charts. We need to show that, you know, the government is basically a government by the corporations, for the corporations. And why would we partner with the very people that are killing us? And so we have a responsibility to start saying those unpopular things. And it's very difficult because we are up against a very well-funded machine. The Democratic Party just buys its opposition any place in the entire country. And so, you know, your blog and other blogs, pie charts, press conferences, you name it, speaking truth to power is the only path.
Yeah, Cheri, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I would, and that's a very good fundamental question. I would say one of the things we do is we try to explain to people about the concept of controlled opposition, lawyer opposition. These young people, and even those older, have good intentions, but because there's so much commercialization, because they're so well funded, we really do the educational piece about helping them to see that this is controlled opposition, and also helping them to see that even from a faith-based perspective, now you have all type of facsimile groups, faith-based groups, similar to the group that's going to be there in DC. They're here locally in the Pennsylvania area. Cheri knows some of the groups I'm talking about, because now they have created their own children. So what we do from a faith-based perspective is begin to share this even with the clergy, or whether you have a rabbi, whether you have someone, whether you go to the mosque or the temple or church or another faith tradition. It's important that we understand that, again, this movement will not be supported or funded by the mainstream agenda, by the colonial agenda, or by the empire. And we must understand that this is really nothing more than controlled opposition. And the clergy has to say that as well.
Mhm.
And I would just add very briefly to that, but I think that both speakers really, I think, thoroughly covered it. But one way in which we can help people to make a distinction between objectively reformist politics that keep people tied to the two main parties, and specifically to the Democratic Party and to the system, is that, as Cheri said, you know, we have to draw clear lines. We have to have a political analysis and use language that can't be co-opted, that clearly lays out what we are in fact up against, and what we need to do and where we need to go. So we say that it's time out now for sugar-coated politics. You got to lay out clearly the politics, the radical politics that have to guide our practice. And that way you will find you can begin to win people over to the kind of radical analysis and practice that we have to engage in. Because as everyone understands, people are sincere in trying to figure things out. And they will go to those formations that they hear about. And sometimes they will transcend those formations. Other times they get basically trapped into it if they're not presented with other political alternatives. So we approach this not in an antagonistic way, because we know that people are sincere. People were sincere when they went into what really was a mirage called the Black Lives Matter movement. But as they became clear, as they developed themselves, they began to move in different directions. There's no accident that you have a organization with the leadership under someone like Cheri Honkala that's been in place raising issues of progressive human rights for more than a few decades, that they're not more well known. Because the enemy understands who to promote and who to try to marginalize. There's not a mistake that you have the Black Alliance of Peace, what many people recognize as the most radical Black formation to develop in many years, that does not get in any way any of the attention that the reformist group, the Black Lives Matter, had. And we understand that, but we know that we have clear politics. We will bring people into our fold, as we have been doing for the last few years. So that's the route to go, folks. We've got to be clear in our politics and understand the kind of war being waged against poor people and colonized people in this system in the US and the global system that we are connected to. Over.
Mhm. Thank you, Ajamu. So where the questions and comments are mounting, so we want to try to keep this so we don't have keep people over time. And so I'm seeing that Chairman Zulu Sherrod of the United Panther Movement. I'm not quite sure if you have a question or a statement. If you have a statement, we can only give you a little bit of time. So please come off mute and share with us what you wanted to present. Is Chairman Zulu Sherrod still with us? I can't tell. Okay, I gotta scroll.
Yeah, let's move.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up. I gotta scroll back to the next hand I see Esther Everum from On the Ground on WPFW and also Progressive Radio Network. Esther, do you want to come off mute now?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Netfa, and the panelists. I guess my questions are directed to Ajamu, who I've spoken to many times. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the Black Alliance for Peace relationship with the Poor People's Campaign. If, a little bit more about how you've discussed with them your differences with their press for reforms. What kinds of things should a group like the Poor People's Campaign be doing instead that maybe Black Alliance for Peace is doing in terms of advocating for human needs versus war? And I'm sorry, there are like 2 or 3 parts, but bear with me, please. And I wanted to know if you got any response to your article written in late April, basically responding to the Poor People, Reverend Barber's statement to the movement about where he kind of equivocated between the moral imperative in Ukraine versus the moral imperative here. So that's kind of all one question, but in different parts. And yeah, I guess so. That's as concise as I can be.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question. The short answer is basically we have not had a chance to really engage the Poor People's Campaign in quite some time. As the Poor People's Campaign gained in notoriety, became more and more difficult to have those conversations. But we have sent messages and raised questions around focus. We've also sent messages and asking why there didn't appear to be a closer relationship or even potential collaboration with groups that have preceded them, like the Poor People's Economic and Human Rights Campaign. But we have not had a chance to get any substantive response from them, and no response from the article that I wrote and Margaret Kimberly wrote in the Black Agenda Report. We were open to a conversation. We suggested that maybe Reverend Barber got caught up in the rhetoric and perhaps maybe had distorted his own positions. But we have not gotten any kind of response in terms of how you square your commitment to poor people and poverty eradication, and to frame it as a moral imperative while simultaneously providing political and ideological cover for the most barbaric and criminal regime on the face of this planet, the United States of America and its war agenda in Ukraine. So we're still waiting for that response, but we think it's a response that we don't think is going to come, but as a question I think all of us need to be raised, and not only with the Poor People's Campaign, but all of these organizations that purport to be in support of poor people and the working class and all of that, but yet cannot seem to disconnect themselves from the agenda of the neoliberal fascist right that controls the Democratic Party and controls the U.S. state. Over.
Thank you, Ajamu. So next we have Crew. I'm sorry if I missed your question in the chat, but if you want to come off mute and ask that way, we appreciate it. Oh, should I? I'm sorry, Esther, I load you. Did you? Maybe you had a clarifying question. Is that what you put? I didn't realize you put your hand back up. I thought it was just from before. I'm trying to keep following the chat and the hand, so I'm it's a little.
Yeah, I did put my hand back up, but then my dog started making all that noise, and I didn't want to disturb oh yeah, my follow-up question was how in the interest of forming a popular front, which is what we need in the country, which is what I think Chile finally had to use to make progress there against the right and the far right, which is what France has decided to do, the French left has decided to do in terms of making gains against the right and neoliberal politics there. How can we form a popular front if we on the left aren't able to engage with people who are, as you said, Ajamu, well-meaning, and even though they may be connected to reform politics, how can we form a popular front, which is what is needed without engaging in some kind of.
Ajamu?
Okay, well, very, very briefly, and I think maybe the our other two panelists can weigh in on this if they so choose.
Yeah, I'd love to.
It's a struggle, Esther. That basically you have to have a popular front, so-called popular front. You have to have a minimum program of unity, of common agreement. And what we are suggesting that at this critical moment, that unity, that common agreement has to be based on some real sharp, clear, radical politics. If that doesn't exist, there's no real basis for any kind of popular front. It doesn't mean one has to be antagonistic. It means that basically we have to make a strategic determination of what is needed at a particular historical moment. And so if a popular front is one in which the radical forces are junior partners, and the people who are driving the politics are those individuals, those organizations that get propped up by the enemy, then it will be contrary to our objective interest to enter into that kind of relationship. We are all for building unity, but that unity has to be based on principles. It has to be based on, in essence, the hegemony of a radical program. Over.
Cheri.
And Esther, I just want to, say from the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, Reverend Liz Theo Harris used to be one of our interns. And we just woke up one day and saw that they had started a Poor People's Movement. But regardless of that, we sent several letters, several phone calls. We even did an open letter because we were interested in forming some kind of unity, at least having some conversations about how we could potentially deal with the bigger stuff that's out here in the world, and never received not even a return phone call or a letter. In terms of the Black Alliance for Peace and other radical groups that are out there, and I don't think it's actually that radical, because I live on the front lines here in Kensington, where people, die every single day. But we really need to unite around, what are our calls? What are we doing? And I think that we have gotten to a point where we're really asking for the restructuring of society, that we are tired of burying. I've buried 7 people that I know very intimately and closely since the beginning of this year. And they were all preventable deaths. And I know everybody else that I talked to is very, very similar. And so at this boot camp that we're going to be having, we're going to be mapping out those concrete plans.
Good morning. How are you?
So we encourage as many people as possible to join us, to attend the boot camp. I know BAP and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign in helping to bring life to the Poor People's Army is serious about these radical changes that have to begin.
Okay, so I did find on crew, I don't know if you want me to, if you want to come off mute and, or I did find it. So this good question, with all due respect to Reverend William Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris of their Poor People's Campaign, can Cheri, Honkala and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign briefly describe the main political differences between the two movements? Can you give very concrete examples that everyone can research for themselves? Thank you.
Yes, I would start with, we don't receive money from banks or corporations. And we do not work with either of the corporate political parties. We don't work with the Republicans and we don't work with the Democrats. We encourage people to get engaged in independent politics. We have a history of working with trying to push forward the Labor Party, trying to push forward the Green Party, anything that is independent of corporate America.
Okay.
And we are desperately trying to educate our other brothers and sisters who are good folks and don't know the consequences of working with corporate America, so that they can help, so we can help them find some independent resources so that they can be totally free to fight for their own liberation.
Okay. So we're coming to we want to end at 11, but I'm seeing that the Zulu Saran, I'm trying to find that name. I don't think that person's here anymore. So we're gonna have to move on. If you are, yeah. And then the last one is Julie. Julie, you put yours in the chat and I can read it unless you want to. It says Julie from Towards Freedom. What are you jointly building to beat back the co-optation throughout the United States? How can people join or support this joint BAP, People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign endeavor, aside from supporting the individual groups? And I think, go ahead, John.
All power to the people. I'm here now, brothers and sisters. They just unmuted me. Thank you. This Shaka Zulu.
Oh, okay. So let's go to that and then we'll go back to Julie's question. How about that?
Okay.
Go ahead, brother Shaka Zulu. Hello? Shaka Zulu, you maybe having technical problems.
All power to the people. There we go. It just unmuted me again. Thank you, comrade. Thank you, Sister Cheri, and thank you, Brother Ajamu, for allowing me to make this statement on behalf of the Rainbow Coalition. So our statement simply is, and it's short and it's brief.
Okay.
Joint statement of the Second Rainbow Coalition on U.S. policy in Ukraine. The crisis in Ukraine did not suddenly erupt in a vacuum, but was created by a deliberate policy of the government of the United States, stretching back years. The policy of expanding NATO to the east, despite the assurances made that it would not advance 1 inch. The policy decision to destabilize and overthrow the democratically elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and the policy decision to prevent a negotiated settlement of the internal civil war that these decisions instigated have all played a major role in creating this crisis. The oil companies and military contractors are reaping super profits from these policies, but the vast majority of people in America have nothing to gain and everything to lose by them. Our interests and those of the capitalist imperialists who run the show are exactly opposite. They control the political parties and the mass media that lies to us constantly. They think we are idiots who have no minds of our own and that we will passively accept our lot as wage slaves and cannon fodder. We say another world is possible. We say it's time to get organized and to start building people power from the grassroots up. The Rainbow Coalition is about building community-based people's power into communal solidarity. And we are also not into the game of picking the lesser evil. So we say, brothers and sisters, all power to the people, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to join y'all in this solidarity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that statement. We're going to try to get in the last questions. We want to go back to Julie's question about how do we build how's a joint effort supported beyond supporting the individual organizations? Cheri, you want to go first? If you have, which one of you have want to? Because it wasn't
Ajamu,
directed.
I think was trying to talk, but it was on mute.
I could, and I'll be very brief. And thank you for the question, Julie. I actually think the question is sort of a both and. That is, that it's not just a question of going beyond supporting the individual formations. I think that one can support the individual formations as a necessity, I think. But also it's important that we support the Poor People's Army that's in formation. That to me is the priority of this work. We want people to understand also too the framework that we operated from, the people-centered human rights framework, that you can get more information from both of these formations. And we want to stress the absolute necessity for organization. So, you know, it's a struggle. We know that we're not going to be able to build the kind of unity that we need, but what we do, we try to put focus on strategic opportunities and the grounding or supporting the construction of the Poor People's Army, and helping to get out this alternative framework of human rights is very important, and building our two formations are also important. Over.
And if I could just briefly add, we are busy in the process of mapping out what does this independent political alignment look like in this country. And if you want to help us in that effort, you know, we're mapping the money. We're mapping the politics so that we can bring all of this to light. And then also, I think that so that we can get away from people thinking that this is a subjective thing and see that it's very much, you know, us versus corporate America. Then the other thing is that we would like to see at some point a national speaking tour with BAP and the Poor People's Army. So we're open to speaking wherever about these things and really focusing on holding as many boot camps as possible around the country, holding a national one in August here in Philadelphia, and ensuring that we're teaching a people-centered human rights model.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So the last question is going to have to be the last question from Thomas I can't see the last name, but I can read the question because somebody put it back. How do those of us on the streets fighting back literally get to say what we are demanding?
Joining organization, become a part of the process, and speak your truth. Those of us that are poor are not going to find our answers in the nonprofit industrial complex anymore. It's done. It's over. A free sandwich and a bus ride is not going to solve our problems. We have to get together, figure out how to take the houses, how to take the food, how to take back the land, so that we don't continue to have to say goodbye to our brothers and sisters in prison or bury them.
Mhm. And if anyone else, I guess that I'm seeing heads nodding as if that's the good response, and no others from Ajamu or Pastor Keith. So I think at this point, if the three speakers that have had any closing remarks, we should end it. How and where do we contact you? Somebody just put in. Or somebody put it in the chat. Go ahead. For closing remarks, let's first go to Pastor Keith. Do you have closing remarks? If we can keep them brief, and then we'll let everyone go.
Certainly, my closing remarks would be simply as Ajamu, brother Ajamu, and our dear sister, comrade Cheri said, and our brother even Chavez, our dear brother who gave us the comments about the Rainbow Coalition. Dr. King gave a speech that is little known, where he said, "I'm going to DC to get your check." In other words, he said, "I'm not going to negotiate anymore. I'm not going to be a part of this duopoly. I'm not going to be lulled in by Johnson, who was the president. I'm not going to be lulled into this one or that one. I'm transcending politics, and I'm going for human rights and justice." And this is what we must do as faith practitioners. This is what we must do as comrades, whatever our background is. We must transcend this capitalist duopoly, as Brother Ajamu said. And we must now let people know we're here. We are abolitionists. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here for the spirit of gradualism. We're here now to be aggressively say that people are perishing, people are losing hope, they're being traumatized, and we must put an end to this, and we must do it from a standpoint of liberation. And we must use our gifts and our talents to liberate the people.
Thank you, Pastor Keith. Brother John Baraka, did you want to say any closing?
Just very briefly, I echo Reverend's comments. Again, we are so honored to be part of this conversation this morning. We pledge our support for the continued development of the Poor People's Army. We stress the need for organization. We want to reiterate that we're not approaching these issues in an antagonistic way, but in a way that is respectful of what we see as the truth and the needs of the historical moment. So we're not going to be attacking folks. What we are going to do, though, is be clear about our particular interests and advance those interests as effectively as we can. So we say to everyone, check out the websites, get more information. If you are interested in the Black Alliance for Peace, check out our website. I put that in the chat. If you are a non-African and would like to be closer to the work, we have a solidarity network that we would love for you to be a part of. So we are both in our formations building opposition, and we keep on stressing. It might sound like a cliche, but you've got to be in an organization. Thank you.
And okay,
go ahead. Yes,
just three quick points. The ruling class has betrayed us 1,000 times. What makes us think that they're going to do anything different this time? And yes, we're interested in uniting, but we're not interested in US exceptionalism, which keeps us from uniting with the rest of the world. We give a damn about what's happening in other parts of the world. And also, now is the time for all walks of life. I don't care if you're an artist, faith practitioner, musician. It's time for you to get off the treadmill. It's time for you to decide whose side you're on. Are you on the side of the people, or are you on the side of the corporations and the billionaires? We're hoping you're on this side because we need as many people as possible to make this fight.
Thank you, Cheri. Everybody, thank you. That concludes the press conference. Rethinking Beyond Ukraine, their war is not our war. And we want to encourage those who just joined us, maybe joined us late and you missed a lot. If you want the recording of this, please, and it's in the chat already, someone put that, please drop your email in the chat and we will be able to compile them all and send the recording. In fact, everybody who wants a recording of it should do the same thing. We don't have it from a registration. So, and then there on the screen, you can see that there's contact information of how to contact Cheri and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign and Black Alliance for Peace at blackallianceforpeace.com. Thank you, everyone. We will keep the video going for just a little bit, just to allow people to put their thing in the chat. But everyone else, thank you for coming, and next time in struggle, no compromise, no retreat.
Check out the Black Agenda report that came out yesterday, and today is Hood Communist Day. Check out the Hood Communists. We got to have our alternative channels of communication. Hood Communist Thursday, that's right.
Buy a shirt, buy a shirt, buy a shirt.